to the December 9th Global News Review. I'm Patrick Ryan, President of the Tennessee World Affairs Council. I'm joined today by Ambassador Dick Bowers and Dr. Breck Walker. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Happy
And how are
holidays
you?
almost.
Yes, it's ho
holidays.
ho ho season. I'm glad we were able to find some Santa hats for our crew here.
Well, I even got a coffee cup in the mail. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. That was from your winning performance in debate watch bingo.
Oh, oh,
Do you remember that?
I do. Yes.
You did very well that evening at the October 22nd Belmont debate. We played debate watch bingo, and the first three place holders. I don't think anybody got a bingo, but you were awarded for the most squares. But that was a lot of fun. Speaking of a lot of fun, on the 29th, we're going to be doing Global Trivia Night. So look for that on the calendar. I know you're a trivia guy, Dick. So we'll
Got a lot of trivia up there. It's just floating around.
Well, there's an advantage at trivia contests to have a life long lived.
Yeah.
Great to be with you guys today for what will be the last Global News Review of 2020. We will let sail into the horizon this year that most folks probably didn't expect to turn out quite the way it did. And then we will be back on January 6th, I believe it is, Wednesday afternoon, first Wednesday in January, and that will be on the calendar. So this is the year that I actually drove less miles than what I reported to my insurance company. Usually, they ask you, how many miles you drive? Well, I don't tell them that I drive 87,000 miles a year, typically. We do a lot of road trips here.
Are you not a USAA guy?
I won't identify my insurance company because this will
Okay.
further embarrass me. I don't know if you all saw yet the program we did last night with Carl Dean, Global Nashville with Carl Dean. He talked with Kate Burke, the Chief Operating Officer at Alliance Bernstein, the large international management firm that has moved to Nashville in recent years. They're occupying a new space on 5th and Broadway, and we had a great conversation about the jobs that AB was creating in Nashville, what they're bringing to the city in terms of their support for community organizations, et cetera. So when you get a chance, take a look at that on our archive at youtube.com/TNWAC. That's Global Nashville with Carl Dean, the December 8th edition, and a terrific program. Anything else that you guys want to mention at the top of the show before we get into our question of the week with Breck?
No.
No, not me.
Okay.
You just throw something in about Venezuela if you want to. Maduro seems to be tightening his screws there, and Guaido is gone. So
Well, he's gone, not gone or forgotten. He's still there, but he's no longer the head of the National Assembly. Sunday there was an election,
which means he can't claim to be president anymore either.
Well, I suppose retroactively, I don't know.
Well, I think he got the job as acting president, and a whole bunch of countries, including the United States, recognized him as that. But that was because he was president of the National Assembly.
So do you continue to be acting president if you were named president, or?
I don't think so, but I'm not sure.
I guess it all depends on what Mike Pompeo has to say.
I don't think so. I think it depends on what Mr. Maduro does.
Well, we know what he said initially, but let's get into our program here. Breck, over to you.
Okay, thanks, Pat. The U.S. Institute of Peace question of the week. Now, Pat, I was hoping this might have a holiday theme, but it doesn't. But the question is, with news of a breakthrough in Afghan peace talks, the United States Institute of Peace's Scott Smith warns that future troop withdrawals should be based on this approach, because if the Taliban believe withdrawal is inevitable, they have no incentive to compromise. And I won't take the time to go through A, B, C, D. They're up there on the screen, and we will give you the right answer at the end of the program. Thanks, Pat.
Okay, we'll give folks another second to let their eyes wander over that and see what they think about the Afghan peace talks, which are entering a delicate phase as we come to the end of the Trump administration. Dick, I think over to you here in a second to talk about our topics of the week.
Okay.
Do
you want me to just name them, or are you going to put the screen up?
No, go ahead and start. And
well, we're gonna continue what we did last week about 2021 and sort of what's in store for America and the world. So we'll talk about that, and then Iran and maximum pressure at the barrel of a gun. So there have been some major developments there with the assassination of one of the top nuclear scientists in Iran, and what's Iran going to do to respond to that. So we'll talk about that. And then finally, Brexit, disorderly conduct. I think as we speak, the Prime Minister of the UK may be on the mainland of Europe talking to the European Union people about Brexit and what's going to happen. And nobody that I know of is optimistic.
Yes. I don't think there's going to be any winners in that, but we'll look forward to that topic further down in the broadcast here. So let's start out with the continuation, part two of President-elect Biden and the world. And we kicked this off last week with our special guest, Ambassador John Kornblum, who gave us the laydown of the U.S.-European relationship, and he also from his 20-year friendship with Secretary of State nominee Tony Blinken, gave us some insights into Secretary of State Blinken's likely approach to his duties as the next Secretary of State. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about the nomination of General Lloyd Austin. And mere moments ago, Dick, I know you appreciate our technical skill here of getting this picture launched from TV onto our program today. But just about 20 minutes ago, Mr. Biden announced General Lloyd Austin as his nominee for the position of Defense Secretary. And I think this has been kicked around in the news for a couple of days. And most people know that General Austin is a retired U.S. Army four-star. He was the commander of U.S. Central Command and held other distinguished posts in the military. If approved for the position, he would be the first African-American Secretary of Defense. His nomination will require that the Congress approve a waiver of a law that stipulates that former military officers need to have a 7-year gap in their service before they could be considered as Secretary of Defense. And this has been approved twice in the past. Once with General George C. Marshall back in the post-World War II era, when Secretary Marshall went on to have quite a successful tour as the Secretary of State. And 4 years ago, when President Trump nominated General Mattis to be the Secretary of Defense, and this would be the third occasion where that waiver was approved. It formerly was a 10-year gap that was required, and it was changed to 7. So the number is arbitrary. The thinking is that it may not be a wise choice to have a military officer who's close to his tenure on active duty to be in that position. But apparently, the president-elect is willing to put General Austin up as his nominee. From everything everybody says, General Austin is highly regarded for his service in the military. I heard him speak, I think it was about 6 or 7 years ago at a conference, quite a distinguished leader. a great service record in combat and in positions like the end of Operation Iraqi Freedom, where he was responsible for the drawdown of American troops in Iraq in 2011. And that's where President-elect Biden came across General Austin and then got to know him over time, as the general also headed the initial response to ISIS in Iraq. So this is going to be an interesting nomination. The general beat out who had been an odds-on favorite, Michelle Flournoy, who is a career professional working in and out of the Pentagon, highly respected as well, and very knowledgeable about all the ins and outs of management at the Pentagon, held senior leadership positions in the Pentagon. And a lot of people were thinking that Ms. Flournoy was going to be the pick. But General Austin, who apparently has a closer trusted relationship with President Biden, was the pick. So gentlemen, we have a highly qualified Secretary of Defense, and I'd just like to share a couple of things that President-elect Biden had to say about the general. In an article that was published yesterday in the Atlantic with the title "Why I Chose the new Secretary of Defense nominee," the President-elect said that above all, I chose Lloyd Austin as my nominee for Secretary of Defense because I know how he reacts under pressure, and I know that he will do whatever it takes to defend the American people. When the Islamic State emerges as a terrorist threat in Iraq and Syria, endangering the security of America's people and allies, President Obama and I turned to Austin, who then led U.S. Central Command. He designed and executed a campaign that ultimately beat back ISIS, helping to build a coalition of partners and allies from more than 70 countries who work together to overcome a common enemy. Clearly, the president-elect sees in General Austin somebody who's not just a military leader, but understands the world of diplomacy. Mr. Biden concluded that article with Lloyd Austin as part of our diverse national security leadership team that reflects the lived experiences of all Americans will be an essential part of this work. He shares my profound belief that the United States is strongest when we lead not only with the example of power, but with the power of our example. And that last slogan there seems to be a popular repose for the Biden administration. I've heard a number of their nominees use those words. So here we have a distinguished military leader who's going to run the Pentagon. If he gets approval to have the waiver granted and then the actual nomination voted for. And I heard Senator Tammy Duckworth this morning on TV say that she was against waivers for just on principle for officers to become Secretary of Defense, but she was going to vote for him as the nominee. So she's going to vote against the waiver, but vote for him once he gets past the waiver. She said that she thought there would be enough Democrats voting for him for the waiver that he would get an ultimate vote on whether to be SecDef or not. It's interesting that when Mattis was up last time, he got 17 Democratic votes against the waiver. So I'll turn to you guys to see where you come down on this military officers going into the position of Secretary of Defense. Senator Duckworth said it's not appropriate to leave the military and become a civilian leader, and she posited that there might be a general who hung up his or her uniform on one day and immediately moved into the SecDef spot, using the analogy of South American military juntas.
Well, let me ask you, Pat, what do you think? I mean, the tradition has been that it's civilian control of the military, and if you're having military individuals who have sort of rotated in and out of that job, with Mattis having had it, and now we're going to have another individual just out of the military. So the idea of having a long break between your active service and then some kind of civilian service makes a lot of sense to me. Now, 7 years, is that a magic number? I don't know. Probably 10 years would be better, but most of those guys who are 4-stars are probably in their late 50s when they retire. So they have some years of service that they can still render to the country.
Yeah. Breck, what do you think?
Well, Pat, the pick is really interesting to me because, as you pointed out with Tammy Duckworth and certainly plenty of others, it's a little bit of a controversial pick, not in terms of who General Austin is, but the fact that, again, he needs a waiver. And, progressives within the Democratic Party are unhappy with that nomination, I've read, because, among other things, General Austin, since he left the service, has served on the board of Raytheon, which is a major defense contractor, and also has been involved with a private equity group that is busily buying up smaller defense companies as an investment opportunity. And he's made quite a bit of money, I think, with these relationships. And that's certainly the progressive wing of the Democratic Party. They've raised some complaints about that. And as well, as you mentioned, there are several Democrats and Republicans that on principle don't like the idea of a third waiver in a historical sense. I mean, it's a rare thing to do. And it's just interesting that to me that Biden didn't find a way that was going to have a little bit less controversy, although I'm sure he'll probably get approved. But there must be an incredible personal relationship between those two for Biden to take this risk, in my mind.
Yeah, well, you raised a couple of great points there, Breck. And I think the question of defense contractor relationships with the Pentagon is also a lightning rod for a lot of these nominations. There were people who were predicting that Michelle Flournoy would run into some obstacles in her nomination because she's gone from government service to working in industry. And I don't suppose that there's anybody who's spent 5 or 6 years fishing on Walden Pond or somewhere who just emerges unscathed by connections to either active duty military service or the defense contracting production industry. And it also raises the question, do you want somebody who doesn't have those kinds of experiences?
Oh, good point. Good points.
And as far as the connection with President Biden, I heard a report the other day that when Biden and Austin first met, it was in Kirkuk, Iraq, when the general was responsible for that theater of operations, and Vice President Biden was visiting. And as an aside in their meeting, General Austin asked President-elect Biden how his son Beau was doing. And that started a conversation that over time led to a close relationship and the building of trust and confidence for General Austin by the Vice President-elect.
I think one of the things you see in President-elect Biden's choices is a personal relationship with most of these folks. That he's known them, he's trusted them. I just got my Foreign Service Journal magazine, and the article is George Shultz on trust. So trust to me is a very high valued thing for the president-elect. And he knows these people and he's worked with them, and I think they're going to hit the ground running. But what Mitch McConnell will try to do or not do in the Senate is always up for grabs.
Yeah, for sure. I came across a clip this morning from our sister World Affairs Council in Connecticut. They named him, General Austin, as the Luminary Award winner of 2020. And they had a vignette of him speaking on the question of character. We will post that link with this edition of the Global News Review so people can take a look at that. He was speaking on the question of character and talking about leadership and character and how important character was to being an effective leader. So we'll have that link on the archive version of this news review. I didn't want to play the whole thing and run us out of time here. Any other thoughts on Breck? Go ahead.
Pat, I want to add just one other thing, and I defer to you and the ambassador since you've been in government or in the military on this. But it does seem to me that as an outsider looking in, that the Secretary of Defense, has a significant management role. They have a significant policy role on defense matters, but they also have, in many instances, a significant political role. And the one thing that General Austin, and there's certainly other people commenting on this, in the past, he has been a person who has, I think, not taken on or not enjoyed at least a political role like people like General Petraeus did and so forth in the past. And maybe that is part of what Biden wants, is somebody who is not going to be concerned about garnering the limelight and pushing his own personal agenda forward and so forth. But General Austin does not come with the political bona fides that you often see in Secretary of Defense nominees.
Well, I would add the observation in my last tour of duty in the military was at U.S. Central Command, the same command Austin had in the 2010, 2011 era. I was a few years earlier than that. And we had a fellow named General Anthony Zinni as our, then they used to call him Commander-in-Chief of Central Command. Now they call him Commander. Apparently the Bush administration didn't like military officers being called Commanders-in-Chief. But anyway, there was an article, Dana Priest from the Washington Post followed General Zinni around on one of his trips to the region, and CENTCOM comprises 21, 23 countries from the Horn of Africa across the Arabian Peninsula into Southwest Asia. And General Zinni was a terrific representative of the United States across that region, not just because he commanded the military forces that America had in the area, but he was also somewhat of a diplomat. When he arrived on scene, he would often outshine the local ambassador, which Dick, that probably ruffled some feathers in capitals when the general would.
I think most ambassadors realize that when you're a 4-star and you're a commander-in-chief or commander of a military command, you have goodies that you can use to reward other people.
Right.
And the State Department really doesn't have many little tchotchkes to hand out, whereas the Pentagon has millions and thousands of millions of these things. So it makes a difference.
You mean F-16s are more important than key rings?
That's right. Or Twinkies, or a cup of coffee, or a bottle of scotch or something. I mean,
Yeah. So I think, Breck, to your point, they may lack what they lack in political experience in Washington, dealing with the Congress and so forth. Well, commanders, regional commanders, unified commanders, they're called, appear regularly before Congress, and they deal with congressional inquiries and visits and so forth. So they do have some political acumen, but clearly in the world of diplomacy, they stand out probably more so than people who come up through the ranks in the Pentagon. Yeah. Okay, so we'll see how that goes. It could be. I don't think it's going to be contentious. I think most Congresses allow the president to have the people that he chooses to have, and other than the waiver requirement, General Lloyd Austin appears to be a distinguished individual who probably will do well in the Pentagon. And clearly the Pentagon has got some things going on, and we'll just reflect back on a slide that we had last week talking about the installation of loyalists from the Trump administration into positions in the Pentagon. Mark Esper was fired, and in the position of acting Secretary of Defense, and more importantly, or equally as important, the installation of some Trump loyalists into policy positions in the Pentagon. And we'll see how that plays out in the remaining, 40 days, 32 days, something like that, of the Trump administration. So there's still a lot of things going on in the Pentagon that people need to be aware of, and we'll see how that plays out, and how the Biden administration moves into the Pentagon and other national security areas. And we've talked previously, and people can refer back in the archives for previous global news reviews, we talked about the national security team, Secretary nominee Blinken, the UN ambassador nominee, national security advisor, et cetera. So a lot of interesting things happening, and we will continue to track those for our folks. Breck, let's move into a new topic on what's going on with Iran, and why don't you bring us up to date?
Okay, thanks, Pat and Dick. So on November 27th, perhaps the key scientist involved in Iran's nuclear program was assassinated. Fakhrizadeh, Muhsin Fakhrizadeh, was shot dead in the city of Absard, which is 50 miles to the east of Tehran. And he's the fifth nuclear scientist, Iranian nuclear scientist, killed in the last decade. There were 4 others killed, assassinated in the years 2010 to 2012. Now, Iran, and I think most of the rest of the world, think that this is the work of the Israelis. And the question comes up, in my mind at least, and a lot of other people's commentators' minds, why now? Why do this now? And it's certainly true that in the last month that Iran, in response to U.S. sanctions, has recently increased its production of enriched uranium and has resumed testing of advanced centrifuges in violation of the JCPOA. Now, just quickly, the JCPOA, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, that's an agreement that was entered into back in July of 2015 between Iran, the 5 permanent members of the United Nations Security Council, which includes China, the United States, and Russia, Germany, and the EU. They all entered into an agreement where Iran agreed to curtail its uranium enrichment and allowed international monitoring of its nuclear program in exchange for the lifting of economic sanctions. And that agreement was fostered under the Obama administration. And in 2018, in July 2018, President Trump pulled out of that agreement. And in response, as I said in the last month, Iran is now in violation of that agreement itself. But so why kill this scientist now? Well, it possibly has something to do with the upcoming Biden administration coming into office, because Biden has said that he will probably rejoin the JCPOA. Whoever did undertake the assassination, maybe they did so in hopes of upsetting any move by Biden and the Iranians coming back together. Or if it was the Israelis, maybe they thought that it was the last time that they could act with U.S. acquiescence to an assassination like that. Or maybe the perpetrators wanted to give the hardliners in Iran a boost, a political boost, in hopes of provoking a military solution to the nuclear problem, which these hardliners would prefer. And hardliners right now are definitely in the ascendancy in Iran in a political sense. Recent parliamentary elections, hardliners that are opposed to the JCPOA gained several seats, and I think now occupy a majority in the Iranian parliament. But in any event, this assassination may also be part of a growing covert war against Iran. Over the summer, you may recall there were 2 explosions that destroyed buildings involved with Iranian nuclear research. On August the 7th, there was an al-Qaeda leader who was shot dead in Tehran, presumably by Israelis, although perhaps with American support. And of course, last January, the U.S. took out General Soleimani, who was a senior general in the Revolutionary Guards. Now, not all Americans think that this was a good thing to see happen. John Brennan, CIA head in the Obama administration from 2013 to 17, he said, quote, that this was a criminal act of state-sponsored terrorism. If past as prologue, a violent Iranian response could be expected, and President Rouhani has promised retribution, but the Iranians may not want to create an issue until they see what Biden is going to do. They wouldn't want to do anything necessarily that might cause him to change his mind or make it more politically difficult for him to rejoin the JCPOA. So, Pat, it's going to be interesting to see what happens between now and January 20th. Between Iran and the United States and Israel, and it certainly will be interesting to see what happens after the Biden administration comes into power.
Great report, Breck. I'm left to wonder, Iran in normal times might be in the position of striking back after these provocations, but I suspect there's cooler heads prevailing in Tehran, waiting to see the Trump administration ushered out and wait to find out what they can get out of the Biden administration, especially since Biden is leaning towards resumption of the JCPOA. Although I read that the position of the Biden administration is that Iran will have to return to the conditions set by the JCPOA, and they've been producing fissile material in excess of what the JCPOA limits have been. So it's not just going to be January 21st. We meet in Geneva and re-sign. And there's really nothing to re-sign with. The U.S. just needs to announce, yes, we're returning to the JCPOA because it's still.
I think, Pat, we want something more out of the Iranians, and the Iranians want something more out of us. In particular, they want the sanctions lifted. So it's not just the JCPOA, it's the Iranians want to have the ability to sell their oil again like they used to, engage in international commerce and help boost their economy, which has been in free fall for quite some time. And the idea that, they know that Trump's not going to do anything about that in his final days. But the idea of being measured, showing a little bit of restraint, may help the Biden administration to be more forthcoming and dealing with the issues the Iranians want.
But still, on January 21st, it's not simply saying we're back in. As you said, the Iranians want sanctions relief, a return to the level of sanctions that were enforced with the JCPOA, and the quid pro quo for Iran in the JCPOA was sanctions relief initially, and the return of frozen assets. And that got a lot of play from the Trump administration, of basket loads of dollars back in the back of airplanes getting taken back to it that we were giving to Iran. And it was Iran's money to begin with. But Iran wants a return to the sanctions levels. The United States wants Iran to return to the level of fissile material, and this would probably involve removing the highly enriched uranium that they produced in excess of their limits to a third country. So there's a lot of moving parts here.
There's another aspect, Pat, that the JCPOA was going to, when it was originally put in, was going to expire down the road.
Right.
And I would imagine that if the Biden administration wants to do something on that, they're going to say, well, we need to kick this down the road a little more. We're going to add another 5 years or 10 years to the efficacy of the agreement.
Right. But just to get back to it, there's also the claim or the demand on the Iranian side that they not only want to return to the conditions that were prevalent when the JCPOA was in effect and the Trump administration left, they want reparations for the damages that have been done to the Iranian economy by virtue of Trump leaving the JCPOA. So there's another wrinkle in it, just to get back to the basic conditions. But you're right, Dick. Both sides want something more than just the JCPOA as it existed. The United States wants to open up negotiations that will include Iranian conduct in the region, things like support for Hezbollah, the Houthis in Yemen, and so forth, missile technology, all of the things that were kind of a dig on the JCPOA as not having done enough in terms of the issues that we have with Iran. So this is a complicated area. The Biden administration, obviously, if you look on its website to the top, issues that it's looking at. The pandemic is number one, economic recovery, social justice initiatives, climate change, et cetera. So renegotiating the JCPOA with Iran is not job one on day one for the Biden administration.
And if I just throw something out, Fareed Zakaria is one of my favorite guys, and he has a program on the weekends. And last Sunday, he had a panel that included an individual, an Israeli, who talked about, as if, yes, the Israelis have done this and here's what they did. And his story was that they parked a car near where the scientist was going to be, and that car had an automatic machine gun that can be remotely controlled, and basically sprayed the scientist's car with bullets and then blew itself up. So there was not supposed to be much evidence left. So that, the Israelis have an interesting way of doing things.
They've been known for some creativity in dealing with such matters.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Pat, I just want to add one thing about since we're talking about the JCPOA. I mean, when we entered into that agreement under the Obama administration, it was very controversial. When Trump pulled out in 2018, it was pretty controversial. And it's interesting to me that the policy divide in the United States is pretty partisan. Republicans want to take a harder line, and Democrats like the idea of giving the Iranians a chance to live up to their obligations under the JCPOA, which they seem to be doing prior to the time that we pulled out. But it seems to me that the U.S. has three objectives with Iran in the Middle East. I mean, Iran they're building nukes, and we'd rather them not have nukes. They are fomenting terrorism in the region and throughout the world, and we'd rather them not do that. And they are also working to destabilize Sunni regimes in the Middle East that are allies of ours, and we would prefer not to see those regimes destabilized. And these policy disagreements, seems to me that there are reasonable arguments on both sides of the argument as to what to do here. And it's a shame that it becomes a political issue as opposed to a foreign policy debate that looks at what our objectives need to be and what our policy should be to achieve those objectives. And it's not a right or wrong situation. It's, in my mind, what works best. And we don't see that happening in the public debates on foreign policy in so many areas.
Right. I guess I would just say that a bipartisan approach might be, as you suggest, to see what works. And if you look at the JCPOA, it in effect stopped in its tracks the Iranian nuclear program. They filled in with cement a reactor that was producing plutonium. They exported, moved out of the country the highly enriched uranium that they had in stockpile, and they limited the production of enriched uranium in the centrifuges. And they installed extremely strict monitoring by the International Atomic Energy Agency, which really kept tabs on what was going on in the nuclear industry there. So then in 2018, the JCPOA went away, and they started to start the inspections. Enriched uranium production went up. The hardliners were driven, as you mentioned, into ascendancy. And the maximum pressure campaign of Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, the 12 points of things he demanded before we would provide any sort of conversation about the JCPOA or any follow-on negotiations, has been an abject failure. Yeah, I agree it's a partisan issue, but if you look at what achieved results and what didn't, I would look at having a conversation with Iran on these issues and getting back to some statecraft rather than maximum pressure and bluster. It's a powder keg over there, and I don't want to see a bad result.
Good point.
All right, gentlemen, let's march on here. We have one more topic, and it is a slippery one that we've been sort of covering. It seems like the dawn of time, and that's Brexit, and what's going on in England, the UK, and our friends in the European Union. And the news is breaking as we have this conversation. So I think if we just bring people up to date on what Brexit is and where we got here. I woke up this morning and read my Economist early morning newsletter, and it said that Britain and the European Union reached an agreement in principle over the implementation of the Northern Ireland protocols set out in the Brexit withdrawal treaty. And I was thinking, wow, this is great news. We've got some breakthrough. And for people who aren't following this, like the news nerds that we are, December 31st is the end of the implementation period for Brexit. You may recall that on January 31st, 2020, Brexit was put in place, but there was an extension of 11 months for the UK and the EU to work out a treaty on how all this was going to work out. And as you may know, Brexit and Breck, you probably like this word, portmanteau of the words Britain and exit. So they come up with Brexit. I like that portmanteau. I'll have to use that more often. We discovered jiggery pokery a couple of weeks ago, so now we're improving our vocabulary here. And just the background on this: the British joined the European Union back in the 1970s, and that was the European Economic Community, which was the precursor to the EU. And then over the decades, the EU expanded the scope and powers, and that became increasingly controversial in Britain. So about, I guess, 10, 15 years ago, an effort arose to reduce the dependency of Britain on the central government of the European Union, which legislated all sorts of rules and regulations. Britain remained out of the Eurozone, so they didn't participate in the currency with the European Union, but they were involved as a member of the European Union in the governance from Brussels. And you can see the layout of the European Union countries besides the United Kingdom. And the United Kingdom consists of Wales, England, Scotland, and Northern Ireland. So on the right there, you can see the vote by UK citizens on leaving or remaining. And that was a referendum a couple of years ago in which the British were able to put to rest the question of remaining in the European Union or departing. And the United Kingdom Independence Party, or UKIP, was siphoning off the support of the Conservative Party. So David Cameron in 2015, prior to moving on to a second term, was concerned about the divisions over the EU. So he called for a referendum, and on June 23rd, 2016, that was the result. The Exeters, the Leavers, won the day, and you can see that the breakout of vote broke down to cosmopolitan versus rural parts of the country. And there were a number of volatile issues. One of them was the free borders, the open borders. The British were concerned about Eastern Europeans coming in and taking jobs from the English. That was a hot button issue. There was talk about the impact on the National Health Service and other things. So in what wound up being a surprise to those who called for the referendum, the Remainers lost, and the Leavers, those voting to leave or to exit the European Union, won. And since the referendum, there's been a lot of political maneuvering. There have been two prime ministers who have come and gone. Theresa May followed David Cameron, and then Boris Johnson took over after Theresa May. And Prime Minister May spent a lot of political capital and a lot of shoe leather back and forth to Brussels, trying to hammer out a post Brexit deal with the European Union. here we are just weeks away from the implementation of an agreement or no agreement, which will cause increasing chaos. And we have no deal at this point. So the conversations, the negotiations are continuing. There's a couple of thorny issues. One of them is the Irish border. And the issue there is, as you can see in the map there, Northern Ireland is part of the island of Ireland. The Republic of Ireland is in the south, and Northern Ireland, which is part of the UK, is to the north. So if the UK leaves the European Union, which Ireland is part of, they would have to institute a hard border between the north and the Republic of Ireland. And the picture on the left there is what the current border looks like between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. So if you have a truckload of products, you can just drive down the road and you're in the Republic of Ireland, or vice versa. And the picture on the right is the customs barrier on the island, on the Isle, the peninsula of Gibraltar. It's a peninsula off the coast of Spain, and Gibraltar is a British territory. So you can see the difference between a customs border and the free access that the Irish in the south and the north have enjoyed since the Good Friday Agreement, and they don't want to see a return to a hard border. The problem from London's perspective is they will be outside of the European Union's economic zone, so there needs to be a customs border somewhere. And the proposal, the backstop proposal of Brexit was to have customs imposed for anything crossing the Irish Sea to the British Isles, the Great Britain, and there was some resistance in the Boris Johnson administration. So that is one question that has gone unanswered. Another contentious issue that is holding up negotiations, believe it or not, are fishing agreements. Apparently, the French fishermen, they get a lot of their catch in British waters, and they don't want to be excluded from British waters as a result of Brexit. So there's anxiety in France, and this isn't a major market, but like a lot of agricultural products that hold up trade negotiations, farmers beat up their politicians, and I suppose the fishermen are beating up the central government of Paris because Mr. Macron is against any agreement in which the fishermen would not be able to continue to fish in the waters that they currently do. So this is really an unbelievably difficult issue between former partners in the European Union to sort this all out before the deadline, 31 December 2020. Ambassador, you're skilled in the arts of diplomacy and negotiation. This escapes me as why here we are years later, weeks away, and we're still fishing around for a deal.
Yeah, I don't see that there's going to be a deal, frankly, Pat. And part of the deal that the Brits have put forward is illegal, and the agreements that they currently have. So I don't know where they're going to go. My sense is that it could impact the government of the United Kingdom, and maybe Boris Johnson's going to have to go the way of previous prime ministers who have been unable to negotiate this particular problem with success.
Yeah. Well, there was a partial withdrawal agreement, and as you mentioned, that if they backtrack on it, it would be a violation of international law. So there's that, and there's also the question of COVID. The economies of all these countries, especially the UK, has been rocked by the pandemic. And there's talk that if there's no deal on January 1st, there will be thousands and thousands of trucks lined up trying to get from the European continent to the United Kingdom and back and forth, because there'll be no standards for customs or exchange. It's just phenomenally frustrating.
Yes.
Hey, Pat, I wanted to bring in a little etymology, if I could. This is interesting to me about Brexit. You mentioned this, but after Watergate in the U.S., every corruption scandal became something gate.
Yeah.
Now I'm wondering if in Britain, because we had Brexit and now we have Megxit when Harry and Meghan leave. And I just wonder now that anytime anybody leaves office or leaves Britain or whatever happens, it's going to be like a Watergate situation over there. It's going to end with, if Boris Johnson has to leave, it's going to be Borzit and all that kind of stuff. It'll be interesting to see.
Well, his nickname is Bojo, so we'll have to work on something like that. So do we have a Trump exit coming up?
Yeah.
Don's
I hope so. 42 days, right?
We'll see how that goes. So we'll stay tuned on Brexit. It's going to happen in just a couple of weeks. God save the Queen.
She can't save Brexit, so I don't know. Right? I mean, they're Netflix won't even put a little thing on its TV screen that says The Crown is a fictitious adaptation of what's going on, because evidently the prince really is a much nicer guy than he's made to appear in the series of The Crown. So
yeah, that's a whole nother thing, the royal family. It's been a rough year all around.
Yeah. Well,
all right, gentlemen. Any last comments on our topics today before we jump into the answer to our infamous question of the week? Breck, take it away.
Okay, well, again, the question was, with news of a breakthrough in Afghan peace talks, USIP Scott Smith warned that future troop withdrawal should be based on this approach. And that approach, the answer to that is that approach is to switch from a time-based deadline approach to a conditions-based approach, because otherwise he's obviously arguing the Taliban have no reason to negotiate in any serious way. So the answer is A.
All right, and we encourage people to get involved with our weekly quiz. You can sign up for that at the TNWAC website. And
my sense, Pat, is that you've got a lot more people taking the quiz these days.
The numbers have gone up, and we were getting some feedback that the questions were too. I think the most commonly used word was obscure. So I tip my hat to Professor Debbie Bernard at the Tennessee Tech University. She and I split the duty on the quiz question writing. So we conferred and we lightened up a little bit. And lo and behold, there were a very large number of 10s on the quiz. So maybe not go back to obscure, but maybe turn the screws down a notch or two.
There you go.
What do you think? Is it too tough?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
I mean, there's some, you get some obscure things. For example, the last quiz I missed, when is Netanyahu supposed to leave office? You had a true or false. Is he going to stay around until November of 21, according to the agreement that he has with the other party? So, but that's the level of detail that I usually don't dig around in. So,
well, sometimes you might be over the question. There are sometimes it's more obvious than it would appear, but we'll work on our approach to that. And this being actually before we move on, let's take a question from our esteemed audience. Robert asks why the disparity in Northern Ireland, where the western part voted to stay in the EU and the eastern voted to leave. That refers back to our little map here, and that's an interesting question. I think the answer, and I don't know 100%, so I'm just by conjecture. I would say that the closeness to Belfast, and there was a relationship with the Ulster government and the leading parties in Ulster, that county, in Northern Ireland surrounding Belfast with the government leaders. So there might be some political connections that the area around Belfast was more interested in being among the leavers, whereas the counties to the west may have felt more an affinity with the Republic of Ireland, being along the border, Donegal and some of those areas closest to the Republic of Ireland may have felt more of an affinity to the open borders and the prospects for or the damage that could be done if the Good Friday agreements and the open borders were a problem. But that's a good question, Robert. We will take that on board and join us back on January 6th for our next Global News Review, and we will happily discuss the results of that. So take a note. Brexit question, Robert wants to know why the disparity, and we'll get into that. But thank you, gentlemen, for a fantastic year of global news reviews. Big hat tip to you guys for providing your insights and perspectives to our friends who join us every week and watch the youtube.com/TNWAC versions of all our programs. And I look forward to returning after the first of the year. And I would encourage all of our friends out there to become members of the World Affairs Council. That's how we pay Ambassador Bowers tea time beverages and
listen, I have so much time. I'm even watching Belarus celebrations where their women are marching along and the anniversary of the end of the Second World War. So,
well, we'll have to find you.
I shared that with you two guys. Breck thought it was cool. So
we'll have to find you some more hobbies, Mr. Ambassador. So just a reminder, join us December 29th for Global Trivia Night. I'm sure at least Ambassador Bowers will be there vying for top spot. And we will be doing that in collaboration with our friends at the New Hampshire World Affairs Council and the Maine World Affairs Council. We told the Maine folks that they should offer a prize of a box of lobster, but I don't think they're against. We'll see how that goes. But sincerely, thanks to you guys for doing all you do to help the World Affairs Council bring our global affairs awareness programs to our community. 2020 has been an interesting year for us to try to keep up with things, but I tip my hat to the work that you guys have done here. Thanks so much.
Well,
Merry Christmas.
Had a great time being part of this, and happy holidays to you both. And here's to a better 2021.
Yes, sir. We will.
Yeah, somebody sent me a Christmas card that said that his favorite Christmas card was Merry January 21st, 2021. So.
Okay, well, we'll end with a tip of the hat here and take our leave.
All right.
Thank you, gentlemen.
All right. See you later.